Today on episode 153 of the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, we speak to combat veteran and Royal Bank of Canada Senior Vice President Michael Hamilton, and he's going to tell you how your leadership mindset will determine the fate of your organization. Today, folks, it's all about having the mindset to overcome adversity. Are you ready for this? All right, let's do it.
Welcome to this episode of Moving Forward Leadership. Stick around and learn how to achieve, excel, and become a leader that people willingly follow. Lead, don't boss. And now, here's the host of our show, Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy.
Yes, welcome one, welcome all. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, where we talk about the three domains of leadership, and that is leading yourself so that you can be the best leader possible, leading your team so you can build high-performing, high-functioning teams, and then finally leading your organization so you can drive that organizational output upwards. And here we take 20 years of my military experience and smash it together with leaders such as Michael today and bring you this, the best podcast on leadership going. And it's so great to have you here. And we got a rock star guest, as always, lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about something so important, and that is mindset and how important mindset is, especially when we are faced with adverse conditions. You see, in leadership, when things are going good, when we're at the status quo, when we are achieving things on a day-to-day basis and everything's just chugging along, life's good, that's where you as a leader can kind of sit back, relax, think a bit, plan for the future, deep future. But when we, like times like now, with COVID-19 around, we face these times, this is where we as leaders have to come out. This is where we as leaders need to shine. This is where we as leaders need to step our game up and not only excel, but basically demolish what's in front of us. And you have to have the right mindset. And I could not think or find another guest that would be better than Michael Hamilton. And you're like, Michael Hamilton, he's a banker. Well, not only is he a banker, he's actually a former U.S. Army officer. You see, Michael was at the battle of the 73rd Easting in Iraq. And you'll hear that he shouldn't be talking to us today. He shouldn't be alive. Yet he and his team overcame that adversity. As well, he is the Senior Vice President of Distribution. He's responsible for leading RBC Insurance sales and the distribution team across Canada. He has over 800 employees that he deals with on day-to-day basis. So just a small organization that he's leading. And with everything that's gone on in the banking industry in the past, he has seen some adversity. Everything that he's done in his military career, he's seen some adversity. So this is who Michael is. And that is the type of guest that I've brought forth for you today. So folks, you know what? That's probably enough for me. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Michael Hamilton on how you can have the leadership mindset to overcome adversity. Hey, Mike, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. So great to have you here today.
Thanks so much, Scott.
So right now you're a senior VP with the Royal Bank of Canada, but banking wasn't always where you spent your time leading. And I would like to go back to, back to where it really started off for you back with the U.S. Army. And, what were your leadership experiences like back as an officer in the Army? And in particular, you and I share a little bit of commonality in that you deployed to Gulf One, whereas I deployed to Kandahar, Afghanistan. So a couple veterans here with combat experience under our belts. So we're going to go back to those days, and I'd love to hear about your leadership experiences and challenges and lessons from those times.
Yeah, no, it's that sounds good. I was, I'll back it up even a little bit before I had the opportunity to go to Norwich University, which is what they refer to in the U.S., one of the 3 citizen soldier schools. So you have the academies, which are West Point Air Force and Naval Academy, and then you have Norwich, VMI, and the Citadel, which are the 3 citizen soldiers. So I had the opportunity to graduate from Norwich with my Bachelor of Science, but with really driving passion to go into the military. And my uncle, who had fought in World War II with the Black Watch Regiment out of Canada and fought Rommel and tanks, he said, well, if you're not going to be in the Canadian military, at least go into tanking and cavalry operations. So that's how I made my choice to when I graduated and when I went into the military to make what direction I wanted to go into. And from there, went to Fort Knox, got my basic training. And through those experiences, a lot of people ask, as you volunteer for different advanced courses, as you would know, Scott, a lot of people think, do you plan that out? And is that something you want to continue to do? And the reality is you kind of cross your fingers and you think a certain path looks pretty cool. So you jump in with both feet. And you're talking about leadership capabilities. Going from Norwich University, and I graduated number 1 in my class, and had the opportunity to be a company commander when I was at Norwich. And from there, I jumped in with both feet, went Armored Cavalry. I really didn't have a full understanding what Armored Cavalry was and all the training and becoming a scout and a LRPS team commander. Going down that path at the beginning, didn't know what that meant. But I think took a little blind faith and had the opportunity to jump in with both feet and go through that training. And I think one of the first instances I often talk about in my own leadership talks to my teams is the anticipation of adversity versus adversity itself. I've talked about that. And what I mean by that is whether you're a civilian or in the military, training, development, success, many people put up their hand in anticipation of the adversity they're going to face. Just think of the environment we're in today. We're in COVID-19, and I think this is where true leadership shows up. Are you fearful of what's ahead of us, or do you look for the opportunity? Do you guide it? Do you logistically look at things and make it better? Or do you kind of curl up and hope this just passes you by and you don't get COVID or whatever items may or may not happen? In the military, this became very true for me when I went through my specialized training, and we started with 162 of us. And as you would know, when you go through specialized training, the numbers dwindle pretty fast. And 18 of us graduated. And a lot of people ask me, they go, oh, there must be something super special about you or those 18. And I said, no. I said, it's not that you're special. It's you get your head right. And it's not about physicality at that point. It's about where's your head. And the real dropout notion is you have to go through the composites of whether that's jumping out of planes, doing land navigation courses, all that kind of stuff. But it's interesting. The trainers in those days would get us into a compound, and we referred to them as black hats. And the black hats would come and yell at you. And so after getting done a 3-day training mission, we're worn out, we're hungry, we're tired, we're beat up, bruised. and all we want to do is rest. What was interesting was they came back at us and said, okay, get your rucks on, and we're going for another 25-mile ruck march. And you just saw the faces. Those that made it to the compound, about half of the guys at that time made it to the compound and had successfully negotiated what we'll refer to as a land navigation course. It's a little more than that, but for your audience, that's what it was. And half of them put up their hand and said, I'm out. And they got up, we're yelling at them, no, you got to stay. And the choppers are on the outside of the compound. They're going, let's go, get your rucks. You can get in anyone you want. And this is the one time that the Black Hats were nice to us. They're going, oh, look at that. You got a chopper. It's a very different age and stage. And back then that you don't have people encouraging you. You don't have a coach going, come on, champ, you can do it. They're going, no, we want you to quit. Get on that chopper. Go back to base. You'll get a warm, hot meal as soon as you land. And half of those folks jumped on. And as soon as they're flying away, the Black Hat comes in. We ruck up. We're in formation. And he looks at us and goes, what are you doing? Put your stuff down. You guys have 4 hours. Rest up. And we're going to still do the march, but you've got some time to get your bearings. So just in anticipation that you were going to have to endure some pain for a little bit longer, 50% of the people that made it to the compound gave up and went back. And it was always a lesson to me and it was all in their head. They just felt in their mind. They just couldn't overcome it. So it's, if you will, that was the first, and what that led to later on in my career. As you indicated, when I went over to the Desert Storm, Desert Freedom, Desert Shield, is when I ended up in my first battle. I remember as a young lieutenant, so shifting stories as that came back to be a real leadership lesson for me, because the colonel comes down and says, all right, Hamilton, you're the first platoon going in against the Tawakana Guard up the Wadi al-Batin, which is our locations. I'm sure you've heard terms like this in the desert. And by the way, you're outnumbered 10-1. Your BDA, acceptable BDA, is 92%, which means I have a survivability of 8% upon contact. And oh, by the way, I want to introduce you to the lieutenant or lieutenant, if you will, that's going to replace you once you're killed in battle. Not if, but once. So I always translate that to civilian terms. Can you imagine, in a sports analogy, if someone takes their kid to a hockey game and the coach comes to them and says, by the way, we're playing the best team in all of Canada this weekend. Your chances of winning are 8%. And, oh, by the way, if you do lose, I'm going to replace all of you. So if in the anticipation of adversity, I cowered or I crawled into the hole and said, I can't do this, I had the potential to lose men, lose my soldiers, not gain the confidence to drive forward. And in the end, here we are 30 plus years later, and that battle, known as the Battle of 73 Easton, has become known as one of the top 10 greatest tank battles in history. And we're very proud to have been part of that and the men I served with. But, and obviously I successfully negotiated that battle. But it's like each of those processes to get to that point. It's not a matter of you're not scared, but you trust in your training, you trust in your leadership, and you trust in your people, and you set the groundwork. You don't allow the anticipation of what possibly could happen. You have to plan for contingencies, but you don't let it envelop your overall being.
There's some great stories. Wow. Especially the first one with the training. It brings me actually back to my training. And I remember us being on a rock march and the sergeant is like, okay, we're going to go for a march. And he's like, here's the end point, the barracks or whatever we were staying at. So we're marching and he's having his little pep talk with us. And of course, we're exhausted. It's about 25, 30 degrees Celsius at the time in Gagetown. The bugs are flying. we're done. And then he's like, you know what? One thing breaks a team and makes them. He's like, taking them past the objective when you told them what the objective was. And we just walked by the barracks and we kept going and going and going some more for about another 5 kilometers until we got back to the barracks.
Jeez. Yeah. That'll do it.
Yeah. So often when I get interviewed on podcasts, people ask me like, what makes military teams so strong? I'm like, it's because we endure the suck so bad that you end up forming these bonds because everyone has to rely on each other. And that ends up forming the team. You end up going through the worst because the training sucks so much. But the reality is the training sucks so much for you to prevail in times, as you talked about with the battle, right? Yeah. Now, I love your talk there and your points about the adversity and stuff like this and having the right mindset. How does that impact the rest of the team as you as the leader having that mindset? What were they thinking? Did you go back to your platoon there and like, hey, we're heading in, by the way, it's 10-1, we have 8% survivability? Or, how did you bring that to them and get them to have the same type of mindset that you had at that time?
Yeah, it's a great question. And not saying I necessarily had the magic answer at the time. I didn't share the odds, to tell you the truth. It's what I did is I went back because we had trained so well together, and we had trained together in Germany, and so we had gone to, you'll recognize the term, names Hohenfels and Grafenwehr, and my gunner and myself, we were the only. Since something like 1973, he and I were the only 1,000-point tank since 1973 that had actually gotten through Grafenwehr tank table 12. And so we were pretty good at what we did as a platoon and as individuals. We were a very strong unit. So I played off of that, going back to our skill sets, what we had done, and really went back to the disciplines of going through fields of fire, what we can expect and what we can expect to see. But I probably at this time, I don't remember my exact words, but again, something to the effect of the odds are pitted against us because we're the number ones in and we're the cav. This is what we do. We go find, fix, and hold the enemy until the big guns come up behind us. That's the game. And so everyone understands it. What was interesting out of it, and don't forget, I'm a very young man at this time, not a huge amount of worldly experience. I'm 21 years old. So everyone thinks, oh, you're 30, 40, you've got some mileage under you to understand some pretty esoteric items. For example, my gunner started to ask about God. Is there a God? What's going to happen to my family if we die? Some of that conversation started to happen. And what I did was really just lead with confidence and not ridiculous optimism, but confidence that we can get through this together if we work as a team, if we support each other, and operationally know exactly what we're doing. And we practiced while a lot of other units, weren't practicing sand table drills. As you know, in the middle of the desert, you practice this stuff day in, day out. And a soldier's biggest nightmare is to wake up to an officer yelling, or even the platoon sergeant yelling, going, okay, we're going to walk through this for the 900th time. Make sure your fields of fire are X. Make sure you've got your counter attack ready. What does that look like? What's the counter defensive position look like? And we went through that ad infinitum, and we were trained so that the muscle memory, if you will, was so clear in everyone's mind that we had already fought the battle probably 500 times before we even got there. Because the reality is, as you know, as soon as the battle starts, all training goes to crap, right? It just everything that you were trained for, whether it's where the enemy's coming from, to how it's set up, to the fields of fire, to the fact that, we're rolling up and I end up rolling right into the middle of a minefield. And we're thinking, before we even knew it, we were in the middle of it. And we're thinking, what do we do? And we go, well, it hadn't hurt us up to that point, so keep rolling. And what we became apparent was the sand was less dense than my tank. So the mines were blowing down, not up. So it gave us a little more confidence. And then, we were receiving sniper fire from a side town to get us reorganized. But the troop knew exactly how we had to move in conjunction with each other, how to sweep, how to call for fire, and how to bring, in my world, in that cavalry world, a massive, 70 tons of iron and steel downrange all at once. And that's what really overwhelmed the enemy, is what we came to learn afterwards. And, I was fortunate enough, after all of that, I didn't lose one person. So when you think of it, I think if you set the mindset from the standpoint of have the confidence, believe in your training, because while it may not turn out exactly how you think, that training's going to give you the flexibility to parry and pitch and do different things in the moment that still support the overall strategy of the platoon or company. And that's what we did. We shifted on the fly. And being in the desert, it was interesting as we were cresting a rise. It's the terrain in the desert is very strange, as you know, and you'll be on a rise and not even realize it. Well, obviously the locals know it better than we do, and they had positioned themselves in dugout positions on the depression of a rise. So we're cresting it and we're silhouetted right on top of the rise. The only thing that saved our backside at the time was a desert haboob or schmal, desert sandstorm, if you will, came up and shielded our movement. So they started short lining all their weaponry. And as they're short lining all their shots, it basically, the flashes exposed themselves, and we could fire twice as fast as that they could. So as soon as they exposed themselves and we saw a flash, we took them out, and our sabo rounds could penetrate, which we didn't know at the time, could penetrate 3 feet of sand before it even hit the tank and still would destroy the vehicle. So it was confidence in the machinery, confidence in the training. And I think my belief at the time was, if I came in and said, guys, the odds are against us, we're the sacrificial lamb, because that's basically what we were. That's what the Cav tends to be. Find, fix, and hold, and 2 hours behind you are the massive guns that come and take everyone out. To me, that's not a great message. So I didn't run with that one. And to this day, the leadership, especially, we stay very close in close conversations and discussions, and we talk about that time frame. And there was every logistical and intelligence report that it shouldn't have gone the way it went, but it worked out. And I go to the flexibility to shift and move in the moment, because the training had been so specific and so ground into us day in, day out. And we did it when we didn't have to do it. I sometimes think of sports athletes, so some of the individuals that, why are they great? Where that's a Tiger Woods or Sidney Crosby. And they go, well, Sidney is the hockey player he is, not because he has some natural ability, but he's also at the rink 2 hours before everyone and 2 hours after everyone, whether it's game day or not. That was kind of where we were in the military. We out practiced, we out rehearsed, we out trained all our countering, or I should say our adjacent units, and obviously survived to tell the story.
The top is the loneliest place. Colin Powell said that once. But it doesn't have to be. Instead, you can find people to talk to, people to run ideas by, people to help you figure out solutions to the problems that you're facing right now as a leader. And see, I felt alone once, and I decided to start the podcast. And with the podcast, I decided that I needed to help people like you more. So that's why I started the Moving Forward Leadership Facebook group. Leadership skills for managers to be leaders, not bosses. You can find it at movingforwardleadership.com/group. And come join us. It's completely free for you to join us and talk leadership with us day in, day out. So check us out again at movingforwardleadership.com/group. Now back to the show. So many great lessons there. Absolutely love it. From the importance of the message, the right message to pass, such as 8% survivability is probably not the best one. But the importance of visualization. I think Michael Phelps says people like, oh, do you envision crossing? Michael Phelps once got asked, when you're sitting there before the race, do you envision you crossing the finish line? He's like, no, I'm envisioning every stroke, every breath, every kick, the turn, every aspect of it before, the finish line is nothing in comparison to everything else. And that's essentially what you're getting at with the training. And I think that's so important. It's so important as us as leaders to take that time and to go through these different options, these different possibilities, regardless if you're in business or if you're in a nonprofit or if you're in government, to go through all these potential different probabilities, possibilities that can occur. And like, okay, well, what happens? What do we do? What's our plan? And it was once said, planning is how does that saying go? Basically, it's like planning is is required.
Yeah, fail to plan to fail.
No, it's
right?
Planning is absolutely required, but absolutely useless. Something along those lines. Or plans are useless. Planning is a requirement, but plans are useless. And essentially, saying exactly what you said, that when you cross that line of departure, the enemy gets to say, and the plan goes out the window. But going through that, giving yourself the baseline and enabling flexibility to shift on the fly, adjust. I think that's what us as leaders, we need to continually do, especially in today's environment, COVID environment. I'm sure now, as a senior VP in a large, if not the largest bank of Canada, you guys have to been shifting. You have to adjust, especially with this COVID environment. So now this is where I'd like to go, is like, you've learned all these lessons. You've been through combat. You've been a troop commander, a company commander. You've had all this great leadership experience. How did that transition from military life into civilian life for you? What did you take? Did you take it all with you? Did you leave some lessons behind?
Yeah, I think it's. I think a lot comes with you, and I think the more senior. The more senior you get, the better you become at implementing the lessons you've learned as a former military officer. In the beginning, I think the disciplines you learn, like I would almost term it early in your civilian career, is kind of like going to boot camp. You survive it, right? You head down, you do what's required. I remember my first job out of the military was Merrill Lynch. It was 250 cold calls a day, 6 days a week, 10 million in assets, and 18 months or you're fired. That was the routine. And I have to tell the story. So I started with 36 individuals, all ex-military, because the CEO at the time had been ex-military and he loved military officers. And we came in, and at the end of 18 months, out of 36, 3 of us were left standing. And of the people that resigned, quit, didn't make it, 15 of them went back into the military. So I always say, so when you think the civilian career is easy, think that half of a cohort was more willing to go back into combat than to do financial planning. It's a crazy concept, but what early on it did, it created an opportunity for me to, understand my flexibility, understand the disciplines you need to become successful. And as I say, almost robotics, probably the wrong word, but understanding what the training leads to so that you can become successful. Then what happened in my career was I was able to get into roles that I became a builder. Leadership was highly required because changes need to be made. And the one thing about military folks, I'm generalizing, but I truly believe this, is we have a high degree of honor, integrity, discipline, and we're doing it for the team, the greater good. It's not about the individual. And I think a lot of times, civilian, if you spend your life, school's all about you as an individual, then you go and get your graduate degrees or do whatever, and then you go into business and you're evaluated as an individual. It tends to be very self-serving. The whole reason, and as you know this, the reason many of us go into service is because we see something for the greater good. We want to participate and contribute something to the greater good. And when an organization is able to build upon its community and build through that, I think it just lends itself to being that better. Now, push the clock ahead 30 years. Here I am at RBC. I'm with an organization that's very influential in the markets, the financial markets, within the communities, and does a lot, and very proud to be part of the organization. But at the same time, allowing us to be quite entrepreneurial, to look for opportunities to drive our teams in a different way, to really engage our clients and care about that for the greater good of the team, not just, and when I say team, that's both clients, that's both the organization. We're giving back, but at the same time, building a business. And it can become very rewarding. And when leading civilian teams, I would say the big difference, the military, sometimes rank and file, it's just get in line and we're going to do this. It can be somewhat hierarchical. And as you know, when you get more specialized, it becomes less hierarchical and much more flexible. I call it the Gumby effect, right? You tend to, the more specialized your training, the more requirements are on you to think through the process, think through the planning. That's like the civilian world. You have to bring people along with you. You have to be able to encourage and understand the message, be transparent, but also understand what you're to help communicate what those motives are, because they're not a natural instinct for everyone that's coming along in the civilian sector. In the military, you tend to all be not like-minded, but you're there for similar reasons. You've all gone. You have whether it's male, female. We have all the discussions about diversity and all of those items. The reality is, in the military, I don't know how many times you actually looked to your platoon or to your unit and how many of each demographic you had. I don't think I ever did that. Yet I had a very broad mix of demographic. And what translated when I came into my civilian career, I've always had a very broad diversity because I go to the best for the business. I go to the best applicable person that can do the best for the team. And I think that's what the military teaches you. It almost removes that effect that I'm going to judge you as a person. I'm going to judge you on your leadership, your capability to be part of the team, and your ability to contribute to the overall goal, what we're trying to achieve. And as difficult as it may be, you may have some shortcomings, you may have some skill breaks. I can fill those in. What I can't fill in is the want to and that discipline to want to show up every day and be different and be flexible. And I think in the civilian world, once you create teams that do that, they almost get addicted to that, because my belief is the core function of the human spirit is they want to make a difference. And when you bring that to the civilian world, people rally around and you do things just like in the military that you exceed your own perceived limitations on a daily basis. And everyone asks about, we always give analogies around athletes or military generals and so on and so forth. And everyone doesn't put themselves in the same context. What a day it is when you extend beyond your own perceived limitation. And that's why we work out. That's why we set goals. That's why we do things. And again, we can run the genie lamp and hope for the best. But the reality is once you have the training, once you go through that, it's amazing how consistently you can exceed growth rates. You can exceed client engagement numbers. You can have employee opinion surveys that rally around a company motivation or a company cry that allows them to engage at a different level. And that's what excites me. But I always go, the basis of what the military teaches you allows you to be that much more effective because it gives you the courage to make decisions despite having all the answers. To your point, everyone does. And again, whether not to pan on actuaries or risk assessment people, and they try to back into it. How is this going to go? And what are the 12 risks that are associated with it? We have to plan for these things, to your point. And the reality is they're always wrong because it's a guess. It is always a guess. Not that it's not needed, just like in the military is, jumping out of a plane and doing things in a certain way. What you can't, those are imperfect conditions. So when I'm in a combat zone and I'm jumping out of a plane, versus 2,800 feet, I'm at 10,000 feet and I got winds or I got rain or I've got bad guys on the ground. It changes the situation. You have to react. All that planning gives you is a map, if you will, to be able to react to the variables in a business situation. And I think and sometimes businesses that struggle, they view that map as there's no other way to do it. And we're seeing this play out in COVID. Restaurants are struggling, as we know, which is a shame. But there are some restaurants that are thriving. I have a couple of friends that own restaurants, and they're actually making more money during this time than they were pre-COVID because they adjusted their scenario, right? You have to shift on the fly. And that's what we learn. In the military, shifting doesn't mean failure. It just means things have changed and I got to do something different to be successful. And I think the overall human spirit needs to get better at that, especially in this environment.
Wow, so many great nuggets in there. And I love basically what you're summing up with is the old term, the OODA loop, right? The observe, orient, decide, and act, and continuously doing that. And a lot of leaders out there, unfortunately, they get stuck in that orient/decide zone, and they can't really make a solid decision because they're scared of what the outcome is going to be, and therefore they don't go into the act to go back to the observe. And that was that model is brought up by USAF Air Force Colonel. I forget the name right now off the top of my head, but the moral story is that you have to be flexible. Plan is, like you said, a map. It's a roadmap. It's not necessarily etched in stone and law, and you must follow it. And I think that's the role as us as leaders. We need to observe these changing times, these challenging times, the things that go away from what the plan actually was. We need to, get all the factors. We need to make a decision, a timely decision. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you get all the information possible. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you don't have the time. Sometimes all the information isn't available. So I always say the best decision is the one that you can make with the information you got available to you at that time. You get new information, then you got a new decision to make. It's just that simple. So it's so much great. And probably the most powerful thing you talked about there was the creation of those high performing teams and getting, believing in something higher than themselves and setting those goals and exceeding limitations, because our human brains, as powerful they are, they're actually can be quite weak in that we get comfy, we're cozy, and then all suddenly you're like, oh, I got to go for something higher and take me out of this cozy zone. I don't like that. But then we realize once we get there, oh, we can do that. And then this new height actually becomes our cozy zone, our comfy zone. And we need to push even beyond that. So many great lessons in there, Mike. As we wind down the podcast here, I do got a couple last questions for you. The first being a question I ask all the guests here at Moving Forward Leadership, and that is, according to you, Michael Hamilton, what makes a great leader?
At the end of the day, I think a great leader truly cares about people, wants to bring people along, and wants to lead from the front. Meaning, be the example by which you dictate or define for people to contribute success and contribute their abilities to the overall team values. So, for what that's worth.
Solid answer. And the follow-up question is, how can people get in touch with you? How can they find you? How can they follow you? Obviously, you're Senior VP there at RBC, but if there's anything that you feel like pitching, feel free. It's all about you right now.
Oh, thank you. It's I run the RBC Insurance side of the house. So again, it's from a distribution standpoint. If they want to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn. And my email, mike.a.hamilton@rbc.com. And I have a phenomenal team across all of Canada. And, we are a multi-line insurance company as well as wealth manager that really set the stage for where we're going into the future in Canada, and have really successfully negotiated our way through COVID. So it's truly a pleasure to be part of an organization, and that an organization that's acceptable or accepted great leaders into its organization across the board, and have continued to develop them on an ongoing basis.
Awesome. And for you, the listener, it's easy as always. Go to the show notes at movingforwardleadership.com/153. And the links in the show notes. Mike, again, man, thank you so much for coming on, taking time out of your busy schedule, and talking about all these great stories and great lessons here. It's been absolutely fantastic.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott. Really enjoyed it. Take care.
All right, that's all I got for you fine folks today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And most importantly, I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, remember, R², S², right? Rate and review the show so that it gets a little bit noticed, a bit more. But most importantly, I can help more people, because that's what I'm here for. That's what my guests are here for, is to help more people become better leaders and not being bosses, right? So remember that. R², rate and review. S, share the show. Share this show with someone who you think can relate to the podcast as a whole and today's topic. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And you can do that via your podcast playing app of choice through movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.